Ah, car alarm going off. Let's wait for the car alarm to finish. Annoying. A couple of weeks ago I did a video where I went up a mountain in Wales and I used two different cameras in my quest to travel light, which is becoming a bit of an obsession with me. I took two cameras because I thought, I'm cutting down the weight so much, why don't I try something completely different alongside my normal 35mm. Now, as I said on the video, I took this 35mm Nikon f65 with a very cheap 28-100 kit zoom alongside an almost identically sized and weighted 6x9 Zeiss Okona, which is a folder from the 1950s, has a huge negative, 5 times bigger than the full frame of the Nikon. Now, I'll show you these on a light box because it's difficult to actually see them properly at this angle, but they're the same 3:2 aspect ratio, so in many respects you've got a lot of similarities there. You're shooting the same proportions. Only problem is with the Zeiss, I have the single focal length attached all the time. I can't change lenses, whereas with this obviously I've got the flexibility. Now there are other differences as well. This will take 36 shots on a roll. This thing will take 8, as you saw in the video. Have to be a lot more precise with this. Lining it up is a bit of a pain. You get some parallax errors. It's a tiny little viewfinder, just a tiny little window through there. So sometimes you crop the top and bottom off the frame, but there are more differences than just the size of the negative. There's also the lens technology. Now this is a very late Nikon film camera. This came out in the early noughties, so it's right at the end of the film era. And although the lens is extremely cheap and made out of plastic, the whole thing's plastic, it has extremely good contrast and it's very sharp. Also, it's multi-coated. I mean, let's be honest, lenses have been multi-coated for decades. Whereas with the likes of this camera, the Zeiss, is a single coated lens. Now before the war they were all uncoated. Now something about these lenses, the design, which is a very simple 4-element design, and the single coating means you get a different rendering, particularly with black and white. They're not as crisp and not as sharp, but also they have a lower contrast. Now that's particularly interesting in black and white photography because the shadows are lifted somewhat. With the high contrast lenses we get nowadays, you tend to get a very sharp contrast, a bit of a soot and whitewash look, even on film. Whereas these older lenses are much more sympathetic, and it goes some way to explain why the images of yesteryear, some of the masters you see out there, had these beautiful glowing black and white images. They seem to have a sort of an aura around them because they're not actually either as sharp in many respects, and the contrast is a bit lower and there's a bit more balance there. And also the design of the lenses being relatively simple, you have a very sharp center on these Tessar lenses, these 4-element lenses on the folders, and the edges aren't so crisp, so you do get that beautiful diffusion, and it's not obvious to the eye, it's not really that clear, but when you look at the image, there's something about it, there's something I think quite magical, particularly with black and white materials. Anyway, a few other things about the cameras. I did use the f65 for the first time on this trip, and I would normally take something like my Nikon f80. Now they're almost the same in terms of features and capabilities. The 65 is a little bit lighter, which is why I took it over the normal f80. However, there are a couple of things, one major thing which is putting me off using the f65 again, and that is the actual back pressure plate on the camera is extremely prickly. It's sharp, and it is tending to put tiny little tram lines on the films in one or two places. Now in the, sorry I just closed down an annoying window that's popped up. In the film days when you were using a darkroom, you wouldn't see that because the diffusion head on most enlargers just really sort of blurred that out. You didn't see it because it wasn't that obvious, but when you're scanning, any little mark on it totally ruins it. Whereas the Nikon f80 has a beautifully smooth pressure plate, very smooth. I've never had any problems with these, so the f80 is going to be coming along with me on future 35mm trips. Now it's probably worth having a look actually at some of the images I took. I've picked out two which best show, I think, the the differences, the similarities between the two cameras. Now we'll start with what is probably my favourite image from the trip, which is one of an old derelict building. Now I have done a little bit of cropping on these just to get them the same size, and I've rezzed up the 35mm image to give it the same dimensions as the 6x9, so when you do all the zooming in, it looks comparable. You know, you don't want one being tiny and one being large, because obviously one is a lot bigger than the other, scanned at the same resolution of 2400 dots per inch. Other than that, no sharpening, no clarity, no contrast, no manipulation. I've just got them to roughly the same size. Okay, so if I zoom in now on the images, we have on the left the HP5 Plus with 35mm, and on the right the HP5 Plus with the 6x9. So obviously straight away I hope you can see that the 6x9 image on the right over here has a lot more detail. It's a lot sharper. The sky is a lot cleaner, a lot cleaner. There's a lot less grain in there. Now both these films were exposed at the same speed, developed in the same chemicals, at the same temperature, so all those variables pretty much the same, I'd say. Let's have a look over here at the old telegraph pole. That'll give us an ideal reference point. Again, I think you can see quite obvious here that the detail is a lot crisper, a lot sharper in the 6x9 image. It's starting to fall apart at 1:1 ratio, 100% in the 35mm image. A lot more detail in the stones. Also in this foreground here, you can actually pick out individual grasses on the 6x9 image, whereas it's a bit of a mush really on the 35mm. Well, just out of interest as well, I did like this negative so much in the 6x9 that I made a darkroom print of it. I don't know if you can see it there without getting too much glare on it. I made this on Ilford multigrade warm tone paper, and yeah, give you an idea of the effort taken. The digital image, which I processed and put in the video, which I'll show you at the end, that took about 20 minutes to make, and the darkroom print took 4 hours, mainly because I'm rusty in the darkroom, but also because the amount of manipulations required, I think it was about 9 dodges and burns. Yeah, all the dodges and burns meant that I got through about 25 sheets of paper before I got one, which I'm happy with. But I'm very happy with it. I really do like the image a great deal. Anyway, let's go back and have a look at another image. Actually, I'll show you. I'll just show you that multigrade image on the screen there. There we go. That's the darkroom one. That's what the scanned image looks like, having printed it in the darkroom. It's not as sharp as the digital one. I can't be as clever with the manipulations, but I don't know, I really like it. I really do like it. It's much more realistic and true to life. One of the reasons I'm going back to the darkroom for a lot of work. Anyway, next image. Same thing. 35mm on the left and the 6x9 on the right. Similar composition, a little bit of cropping here because I was slightly out with my framing on the 6x9. It's very, very difficult to get it accurate. And let's have a look again, starting at the top with the mountain and the sky. Okay, straight away again, tons of detail, well, a load more detail in the 6x9 image. Much cleaner skies, much less grain, no mottling pattern in there. Let's have a look down at the trees. The trees on the left, 35mm, it's a bit of a mush, although it'd be fine at most print sizes. A lot of detail on the right though, you can start to see individual little twigs and branches in there. Down to the fence, I think that's quite obvious. The fence there is quite cleanly defined in the bigger negative, and it's quite soft in the smaller one. And yeah, the sheep are a bit yeah, soft sheep, whereas here you've got clearly defined sheep. I do like sheep in Wales, there's an awful lot of them as well. Right, yes, down in the foreground, as you can see, it goes without saying, tons of detail in the 6x9 image. So what can we deduce from all this? Well, clearly the Zeiss, with its massive 6x9 negative, which is 5 times bigger than full frame or 35mm, is capturing a lot more detail, despite the fact it's 60 years old and it's got a simple front cell focusing mechanism. There's a lot more detail in there. It's smoother, it's cleaner, it's just going to make a better print in terms of enlargement. But having said that, the 35mm, I'm very, very impressed at the level of sharpness and the clarity of the image. And I know it looks very mushy on the screen, but these are unprocessed images. They are straight out of scanner, and they are on my Epson V700, which is not very good for scanning small negatives. So a proper scan with either your digital SLR or a dedicated scanner would give you a lot more out of the 35mm scan, but that's for another video, which I'll do. So yeah, two ways to achieve lightweight, both pretty much the same weight, all in, camera and lens together, same film, same shutter speeds, same processing. Yeah, it's a bit of a wash really. I would say the 35mm is vastly more flexible and gave me some lovely wide angles that I couldn't get with the Zeiss, the 6x9. But then again, you could take the 6x9 and you could crop heavily, and you could probably get the equivalent of the telephoto end of your zoom. So, in summary, I like both the cameras. I would typically carry the 35mm though, because I get more shots on a roll and I can work a lot quicker. I haven't got to look at the back of the camera to wind it on, fiddle with the shutter, etc, etc. But I would definitely consider taking the Zeiss with me if I was shooting static subjects on a tripod. I think it's perfect for that. It's getting close to medium format size and quality. You could crop it down to a panoramic, and I may well do that on another outing, and get quite a nice 2:1 or a 3:1 panoramic image out of it. And it would take a lot of enlargement. You could probably go up to 30 inches on this, and you could also run it with colour. Even though people say you need more modern cameras, the lens on this is absolutely superb. So I do hope you found this interesting as ever, enjoyable, maybe educational, and I will see you again on the next trip. Thanks for watching.